Hello everybody, I'm Pacific and welcome back to another episode. This time we're doing a new series called My Personal Connection to, until it gets a better name, but in this episode I'm going to be talking about my personal connection to the Super Nintendo. Now for all my life I have known what a video game is, what a game controller is, and what a gaming system is. And that's partially because I had older brothers that were also gaming nerds. But specifically, the Super Nintendo was the console that I remember playing the most games on in the beginning. I played basically Super Mario and a tiny bit of Zelda. That was it. And it was there that, I beat Super Mario. That was the first game I ever remember beating and 100% completing was Super Mario. And that kind of got me into gaming. There was a couple games afterwards that my brothers owned that I played on it. I almost beat a couple of them. They were cool games, and it really got me into gaming after I had known what gaming was. And when I go back and play Super Mario, I kind of have this nostalgia trip of, my older brothers are out in the room playing on the GameCube or the N64 and all that, but me, I'm sitting in my brother's room on his bed at this little dinky-rink TV, rinky-dink, honestly, and I'm playing Super Mario because I loved it. I remember playing through levels over and over and over and over again and finally beating them. I remember getting pissed at Super Mario. That was the game that got me pissed at video games. That was the game where my parents said, "Stop playing, you're pissed at it." And honestly, when I go back and I play Mario games, I'm generally a lot better at them than my friends, specifically the 2D side-scroller ones. I remember even on my phone, I was playing one level on Mario 3 and I was like, getting kind of far in it, and my friend Connor goes, you're missing coins, I gotta try this, and he died in the second jump or whatever, So I'm generally way better at platformers than my friends. And not to mention, Super Mario had a very limited two-player mode, so I got a little bit of, two-player gameplay with my brother and my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, so if I was 4 or 5, she was 2 or 3. Not exactly the best mix. Later on, I got into Donkey Kong, and I played a lot of that by myself. That was another cool platformer where it was just really interesting, I'd been, at that point, seeing Zelda and Halo, and it was very strange to me to not play as a person. That was the interesting part, was you were playing as gorilla monkey things. You weren't actually playing as a person. And sometimes I wish that I owned an actual Super Nintendo and I had Super Mario World, Link's Awakening, Donkey Kong, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was a superhero game, some kind of superhero game. I wish that I had those 4 games because those are my first games, right? Those are my games that I learned how to game on after I learned what gaming was. And it's also, later on, after I was, I guess, a teenager, I remember those games and I was like, what games did those games come before? I knew about Mario, I'd seen normal Mario on the Nintendo, but thinking about all those old games I played, I was like, I want to know the games that came before. Not just Nintendo, but before the Nintendo came out, and it got me into gaming history, and I actually like gaming history. I like it a lot because it's a little bit easier to see the evolution of games, from the 70s all the way up until now. Cars, it's all the stuff's on the inside, and to someone who's new to cars, you can obviously tell the difference between a modern car and a car from the 80s and the car from the 60s, but with video games, if I say, this is what the Nintendo looked like, and then, however many years later, I don't remember exactly, I think it was somewhere between 4 to 6, I don't know, the 90s. This is what a game looked like in the late 80s. Here is a game console that came out super early 90s. You can obviously tell the difference. And the 90s all the way to the later 90s with the N64, then the GameCube was kind of oh, they just look better. But those game consoles were also the ones that catalyzed the rest of the gaming industry, that introduced us eventually to consoles that wanted to one-up each other, Obviously the Super Nintendo was competing with the Sega Genesis, but when the Nintendo 64 came out, It also had to compete with the PlayStation, and because of that, Xbox ended up deciding to, be created by Microsoft. Microsoft made Xbox, and now I am an Xbox gamer. I still love Nintendo games. I sometimes prefer Nintendo games over Xbox games. I kind of bounce back and forth. And I say Xbox games loosely. I know that most of the games on Xbox can also be played on PlayStation 4. And I'm always interested in Nintendo news. Not always Xbox news, but Nintendo news, like what they're doing with their consoles, what kind of games they're making. I'm always interested in that kind of news because that's the evolution of my early childhood, the evolution of my first memories, probably my most favorite video games. It's how have they grown up with me? I wasn't there for the beginning, but I was there early enough into the ride to where I care about the direction of my original games. I care about where Mario's going and Zelda. I'm really happy with where Zelda is right now. Even Skyward Sword, a lot of people didn't like it. I was happy to see that Zelda was still innovating itself. It's nothing like the original. I mean, it kind of is like the original a little bit, I'm gonna be honest. But, Link's Awakening, very different from the original Zelda, and Link's Awakening is very different from the one that just came out. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you want to see more of these, I can talk about my personal connections with specific games like Super Mario, Call of Duty, all sorts of indie games. Any game that I've ever played, I can tell you my personal connection with it and make a video about it. I really like these because I think that with so many games on the channel, it's hard to find like my pacificness, like what makes me me. And I think, making a video series about it, not only does it give me videos to make and I can express my creativity in them, but it gives you guys a little bit of a personal outlook on stuff that, why would I focus, if I don't post any Nintendo content on my channel, why would I care more about Nintendo news than Xbox news? I think you guys should know that. So, I'm Pacific. See you guys in the next episode of whatever I decide to make.